Hello there, Ungainly Titan here. Welcome, and let's talk about role-playing games. I've been a D&D user since sometime in the late 1980s, 87 or 88 or thereabouts, when I purchased my first copy of D&D, the D&D basic set at the time. Last autumn I put up a couple of videos on my YouTube channel on the use of Fantasy Grounds 2 from my friends for our weekly Thursday night online D&D game, and they've become the most popular videos on my channel since. Even on a daily basis, they overshadow my regular World of Tanks content. So in the spirit of the Mighty Jingles, a fellow YouTuber who said he's a noob gamer so that you don't have to be, I thought I would do something similar for the people who are role-playing curious. That is, if you are interested in role-playing but you haven't ever tried it, this video is for you. Basically, I'm going to do the research so you don't have to. So let's start with the basics. What is a role-playing game? It is a game where you play a character in a fictional environment, and there are usually someone that acts as an umpire referee that sets the scene and plays non-player characters and adjudicates the rules and how the player character actions and intentions interact with the world. This includes the use of dice or other randomizers where outcome of contested events is uncertain. So in a traditional role-playing game like Dungeons & Dragons, the referee is usually called a Dungeon Master, and he describes the scene, plays the non-player characters, and tells you what the outcome of any dice rolling is, whether you succeed in the task, whether it is to hit the enemy with a sword, or to climb a wall, or to pick a lock, or whatever. In the video description below, I'm going to have a couple of links to YouTube videos of people playing role-playing games. There's a Fate Core game, there is the Dice Tower Plays D&D, and there is the Critical Role First Episode game. I would encourage you to look at those videos, some in part or completely, because they will show you what a role-playing game is rather than having me describe it and wasting time, because it can be hard to imagine if you actually haven't participated in one or seen one played. You can do it right now if you want to. I'll wait here. I'll be still here when you're finished, and you can come back here and finish this video. Now I'm going to make a brief comment on those videos. The Dice Tower video, The Unexpected Tower, is more typical, I think, of what I have seen in role-playing sessions over the years that I've been involved in role-playing games. It is sort of the more normal standard. The Mark Mercer Critical Role-Playing Campaign First Episode and the Fate Core Rules game is kind of a higher standard of role-playing. But the people in it are very experienced gamers, and they're also actors and media personalities and stuff like that. So they are more, I suppose, they operate at that higher standard anyway, all the time. So if you found the standard, say, in the Matt Mercer video to be intimidating, say the standard of role-playing and voice acting and things like that, remember these people are professional voice actors. You don't have to match that standard, certainly not in your first game. And there are people who don't. There are people who play Dungeons & Dragons as if it was a tactical war game, bringing it back to its roots. And there are people who don't do voice acting or just describe what their characters are. It varies from table to table, and it varies from group to group. Different groups are comfortable with different levels of role-playing, and different levels of immersion, and you may find yourself enjoying one way of playing it and not others, and that's perfectly fair. It's meant to be an enjoyable hobby, and it's not something that you have to do in a particular way to do it correctly. That said, if you find a group, they may prefer a particular way. They may prefer, say, deep immersion, and they may say that all words spoken at the table are spoken in character, and they might be quite strict about enforcing that. And that can provide a very good and enjoyable role-playing experience, but that might not be what you want, and you might want something a bit more casual and relaxed, and those groups are out there as well. So you've watched the videos, you've seen or heard what I've said so far, and you're actually interested in continuing on and exploring the wonderful world of role-playing games more thoroughly. So how do you go about it? Well, you can go find a group. It has an opening for a game in your area. You can find a group online playing through either virtual tabletop or even sometimes through something like Google Hangouts. Or you can start your own group. We'll go through each in turn. Finding a group locally can be easy or hard. A lot depends on where you live. The more population, obviously, the greater the probability there are local groups. Your best bet is if there's a local game store in your area. a game store that sells board games, D&D or Pathfinder manuals, or Magic the Gathering and other collectible card games. Also a possibility of Games Workshop, Warhammer 40k models, those kind of shops. There's a very strong crossover between those kind of games and role players. Whereas, for instance, video games and computer games, while most role-playing gamers will play video games and computer games, majority of video gamer and computer gamers might not have played role-playing games. The reverse isn't true. Role-playing is the smaller hobby, even though it has expanded massively in recent years. So a lot depends on where you live and who's hanging around in the locality. So if there is a shop in your area that sells board gamers or manuals for role-playing games, then almost certainly they will know people who run role-playing games. You can just go in and ask the staff. They'll know people. They may do it themselves. They may actually run them in the shop at particular days or nights of the week as sponsored events by the manufacturers. Wizard of the Coast, who do Dungeons & Dragons, or Piazzia, who do Pathfinder, both run sponsored or organised table play or role-playing games. They may also have a notice board or something like that where people actually put up notices where they're looking for players or they're thinking of starting in a particular role-playing game, and it may not be Dungeons & Dragons, but it doesn't have to be. The technique of role-playing is common across all games systems, and the only difference is how you resolve contests or issues like that, and that can vary from role-playing system to role-playing system, but you could try them all. There's no harm in expanding your repertoire and trying out different games and different genres. If you don't have a game store in your own area, then it's a lot more difficult. You'll have to search social media, Facebook, etc. See if there's people advertising gaming clubs or groups looking for players in your area. If that doesn't work out, your next option is to play online. For this, you'll need a virtual tabletop. Essentially, they are pieces of software that act as a kind of a meeting place. They'll give you the ability to roll dice, to create character sheets, to see the maps that the referee or games master provides, or dungeon master provides, and sometimes they provide a certain amount of automation on the rule systems. Now, there are a large number of virtual tabletops out there. Some of them are quite venerable in that they're around for 10 years or more. But two of the most popular are Roll20, which can be found at roll20.net. Again, the link is in the video description below, which is free to use. It also has a join group function, or a looking for group function on its website, where there are listings of games that and times when the games start and dates, and what description of the campaign or what they're exactly looking for. Now, one of the things I noticed when I was looking through this listing, there's a fair number of them that are pay to play, but there's also as many, or not, if not more, that are free to play. Again, a link in the video description below. The other very popular online virtual tabletop is Fantasy Grounds. Now, Fantasy Grounds is a more traditional application. You download the application and you run it and connect up to people. It costs money to buy, although sometimes you might find a situation where the referee or the dungeon master is willing to foot the bill and has already footed the bill, in the sense that they bought what's known as the ultimate license. This allows them, people with unlicensed or copies of Fantasy Grounds that they downloaded, that they haven't actually paid for, to connect to people who have already paid the ultimate license. They're essentially paying your license for you. Now, the Fantasy Grounds application doesn't have an inbuilt looking for players or looking for group functionality in the application, but the website has, on the website forums, there is a forum dedicated to people looking for groups. So you could also search there for online groups. Now, I should note, the one thing you might find discouraging is that many campaigns end because the players can't manage to attend regularly due to real-life pressures. And while I've never gamed with strangers online, so I can't comment from experience, but from hearsay I believe that no-shows are even more common online than they are at face-to-face meetups. So you may have to be persistent at the beginning, looking for and finding a group that can meet together regularly enough to keep a game going and to become a stable feature of your gaming life. One piece of advice there is that if you are in a group and the group meets and the campaign falls apart, that if you do like some of the people there, you find them compatible and you would consider them to be friends, that you might keep in touch with those people, and when another game arrives, you might be able to join them in another game, perhaps with another place or with another person running it, or slightly different lineup, shall we say, than the one that broke up. Your final option, which is what I was forced to do all those years ago because there wasn't anybody in my locality at the time who was interested, was you can run a game yourself. And I will briefly cover what you need here. First of all, you need at least 4 people. You can do it with less, but most of the published material, particularly if you're going to use published material, is for sort of 4 to 6 people. Generally, it's balanced around 4 people, and if you're not experienced, then you might find the idea of creating your own content or balancing a game intimidating. So 4 people is good. Plus 4 people covers all the basic roles. Essentially, a game like Dungeons & Dragons in particular is considered, the standard group is generally considered to be a fighter, essentially a tank, a rogue or a kind of a skills character who's, good at disabling traps and picking locks and climbing and acrobatics and that sort of stuff. And you generally have a healer who would generally be a cleric, and you finally would have a wizard or a magic user of some sort. So 4 players and a dungeon master is a good combination. You can run with up to 8 people. I wouldn't personally be inclined to go with more than 8 because the 8 can be quite challenging because just getting around to each people quickly enough to keep everyone interested. The noise at the table can be quite high, so just making yourself heard over the din of people chatting away and babbling, discussing tactics or whatnot, can be a bit of work, and it's more work. Now, that said, the legend has it, I remember reading that Gary Gygax, one of the inventors at Dungeons & Dragons, had up to 16 people at a table. But he is, for those cases, had specialised player roles like a mapper, person who drew the maps, and a caller. And the caller was a person who basically did the cat herding. They got the players together, worked out what the players were going to do in the next round, and then told the dungeon master, who then resolved any tasks and issues that might needed to be resolved with dice rolling. Okay, so you got a bunch of friends or mates and you've got a place to play. Well, what else do you need? You need pencils, paper and some dice. Now, if you don't have the required dice, there are apps for phones, PCs and tablets that can roll the required dice. You search on the Windows Store, for instance, put in dice rollers and you'll get 70 something odd apps alone, and I'm sure you get even more on Google Play and even more again on the iStore. You probably would also be able to search online in Google and find even more. If you want to buy dice, again, one of the local game store will have them, as will Amazon and any number of online outlets. You don't need rules to start off. I will include a link in the video description to a free version of Dungeons & Dragons. It's a kind of a stripped down version of the rules. It only includes a limited number of classes, I think the basic 4 that I mentioned, and only 1 build for each class. That's what they call subclasses in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. On the business of running a game of Dungeons & Dragons, I will include links in the video description under its own section on help on running the game. I will give you some links on advice on dungeon design. I will give you links to videos by Matt Colville, at least the first video in a video series that he did on running a game of Dungeons & Dragons. There is some advice from Mike Merles, who's the head of the D&D development and in Wizards of the Coast, and 1 or 2 other places like that. If you want more information from me, well then by all means ask in the comments and I will try and answer it, and if it's maybe too elaborate for a response in the comments, I might make a video out of it in the future. Feel free, if you have any questions about any aspect of this, to ask in the comments, and I will try my best to answer. And again, if people want me to cover something specific in a video, again, feel free to ask in the comments, and I will try to accommodate you at some point in the future as well. I won't be doing this on a regular basis, but I may do the occasional video on this topic. Well, that is as much as I've got to say on the topic of role-playing games at this point in time. If you found the video interesting, please consider giving it a like, because it really helps the channel out, and if you haven't already done so, consider subscribing to the channel. Thank you for watching and giving me your time and attention. I will catch you all again soon. Bye.